January 2017. Prior to assuming leadership of Vision America, John served as a board member and in various roles alongside its founder, Dr. Rick Scarborough, mobilizing and encouraging pastors and Christians across the country to be voices of truth to our nation. For over 30 years, John served pastors in local churches and parachurch organizations after becoming a Christ follower in 1986 during his sophomore year in college. I think that kind of work is so important because we know so many Christians who sit on the sideline and don't even vote, let alone get involved in the political process. So I really appreciate the work that groups like this do. Will you please welcome Mr. John Grace?
Happy to be with you tonight. I am going to share kind of the story of how I got involved in this, what we've done, and my hope. I'm an optimist, and I know if you ever check the news, you can easily be a pessimist. If you see what's going on in our country, it's not hard work to be negative or pessimistic. It's a little more difficult to be optimistic. But as I go through this, there's kind of two ditches people fall in. You kind of deny all the facts to be an optimist, or you look at all the facts, and some of those people become pessimists. Oh, well, look, the church is not engaged. Oh, well, look, half the people aren't voting. Oh, well, look, it's already given up, just quit. I'm like, are you kidding me? You need to look at the facts. I'm about to show you how we look at the facts. But David looked at facts and said, yeah, the guy's 9'3". Yeah, he's got an armor bearer. Yeah, he's been fighting since he was young. Yeah, I don't have any armor on. Yeah, his sword weighs this much. Yeah, his spear, just the head of it weighs this much. That just tells me what I need to do to strike him right above his left eye to put him down. So when you look at the facts, you can either let them destroy you and get you discouraged. I want to hopefully give you a different way to look at things that are negative. Does that make sense? Yeah. And so Vision America, how many of you have heard of Dr. Scarborough, Dr. Rick Scarborough? Any of you? Handful of you, okay? For, I guess, 18 years I was on the board. I got involved more in politics after 9/11. It kind of shook me and woke me up, and that was the beginning of me getting really engaged and involved in that. And he was a pastor that got involved, got his church to take on the school board. They took over the school board. Then they took on the city council. They took over the city council, 3 of 5 seats and 4 of 7 seats. And then they started going after the city and the nation. And for 20 years, he's been going around the country trying to wake other pastors up to kind of try to do the same thing. Well, I was on the board. I'm an accountant. I'm a lawyer by training. My wife, would you stand up, sweetheart, who's in the back? She loves when I ask her to stand up. It's one of her favorite things when I do that. My kids are cute because she's pretty, and so that's the secret I figured out. And so what happens is a lot of people, well-meaning, you know, I'm on a lot of boards, and you know, you're engaged a couple times a year, every quarterly board meeting or whatever, but you're not really in the day-to-day weeds, okay? You can be a member of this Northeast Tarrant Tea Party Club, or you can be somebody who's so engaged you're driving all the way down to Austin or driving over to a luncheon or doing whatever. There's just a difference. And so after 2012, at the very end, the election didn't go well, and it was funny because one of my affinities for the Tea Party groups is when the elections had been going, you know, roughly, especially 2008, this 2010 groundswell of all the Tea Party groups rose up, and Dr. Scarborough was going to quit in 2008. And the reason he didn't was because of the Tea Party movement. And it sparked new life in him because the overwhelming majority of those people were believers who wanted to do something and were patriots and wanted to do something for this country. And so in 2012, the election went poorly, and I called him and said, hey, you know, I'm just checking on you, how you doing? And he said, well, you know, I'm not good, I just don't know what's the point. Sometimes you feel like you fight and you fight and you fight and you get fatigued. You try, and it's easy to quit. And the scripture says if you do not quit in well-doing, you will reap fruit when? In due season. But you gotta not quit, because if you quit, you don't get to reap. That's in the verse, right? And so I said, well, what if he invited me to this meeting in D.C., and what I'm about to show you is something he wasn't going to tell me until later. He kept asking me for several years, you take this, you take this, you take this. I would say, no, I got a full-time job, I'm not doing this. And after 2016, I'm about to show you what we did. I took over, and he's now pastoring people in DC. We restructured what was a 501c3 to a 501c3 association of churches. And it's a nuanced difference that happened because our former president, Barack Obama, got busted with a memo attacking 3 kinds of groups. Tea Party groups, Christian groups, conservative groups. Lois Lerner, the memo came out, he made their life hard, including our group. A lot of audits, and even when you win the audit, you're still wasting all your time fighting an unlimited government that's just a beast. I call it lawfare instead of warfare. That's how they destroy a lot of people. So I felt like the Holy Spirit said, John, the prudent in Proverbs, foresee danger and take refuge. So I was working, it's 277 groups, they filed a class action, they won that, in case you never heard the news on that, but because of it, the IRS is now favorable in looking towards several groups, so we reclassified as an association of churches. We have over 1,000 churches that have joined in our association, no different than like Southern Baptist or Assembly of God. That allows us First Amendment protection. And a rogue IRS agent can no longer audit us every year. A rogue IRS agent can no longer leak our tax return so that the New York Times can publish all our donors and scare them all away. We now have First Amendment protection, not just some low rogue agent. So I want to go through, our vision is to mobilize pastors from the top down, but also to wake up people from the bottom up. And I'm going to show you how we do that. The people, we try to identify them, and I'm going to show you this, register them and mobilize them, and then get them involved in the lobbying process. We do this online. We can target social media. We can target their home Wi-Fi address. We can also target their text message, and I'll show you how to do that. And we can even do geolocation technology. It happens all the time. It's on your ad. You get ads this way. But then we also mobilize pastors, and I'll show you kind of how we do that. We build databases. I'll show you that. We do educational events, but then we measure every one of these things. So think in terms of pastors and people, okay? So here's the problem. This is how many people since 1980 vote in a presidential election. Little more than half, about 55%. I think next year the big story is going to be a huge upswing. This last 2018 election broke records for an off-year election, and I think that's not a reported enough story. It's going to be massive. Nationally, in the last 60 years, 16% uptick in off. But part of the problem is we tell pastors, listen, half your people almost are not voting. And half of them aren't even registered. So if I said to everybody in this room, get up, imagine me cutting this down the room, and everybody halfway through here, you're not even registered. Well, if you're not registered, you're not even in the game. So I translate. I'm an ordained pastor. Jack Hayford ordained me. Serve churches, but I don't run a church. I'm actually on Pastor Jack's board. I'm on a lot of boards. Y'all know who Charlie Kirk is, Turning Point USA. I'm one of his strategic advisory board guys. And so there's a lot of different strategic ways to reach minorities, to reach young generation, to mobilize people who are not registered and mobilize people who are. But this is what the problem is. So what I do with pastors is I don't talk to them in terms of, hey, these are low propensity voters, these are unregistered voters. I don't use that language with them. It makes it all political, and they're not about that. I say these are disengaged Christians. Yeah. Yep. And God's real clear about it. This is not a political thing, it is a spiritual thing. And if you've lost your salt, what are you? You're no good except to be walked on under the feet of men. And that's what's happening with religious liberty persecution and all kinds of issues we're being walked on. Another translation, I think it's in Luke, he says, if you lose your salt, what do you do with the salt? You throw it with the horse manure. That's pretty strong language. And so I want to show you some of the things that we've done to fix this problem. And we've empirically measured now that we can do it. So I was with Ken Starr in Israel last year. He found out what I'm about to show you. He was just beside himself. So you need to get with Cornyn. So Ken Starr, 30 years ago when he was U.S. Solicitor General, he hired a young man named Brett Kavanaugh. Have you ever heard of him? Yeah. So he knew him for 30 years. This man right here is our senior senator, majority whip, and was going to be counting the votes for this person. So this was our gathering in Dallas, Fort Worth, shortly before that, talking about the courts. And we also, Cornyn was also instrumental in pushing the prison reform bill that Trump wanted to do, which has allowed us an enormous influx with the black pastors across their country. And I believe 2020 will record, you can write this down because people told me I was crazy 4 years ago when I said the Rust Belt is why Trump will win. I believe the black pastors, the black Christians are why Trump will win again in 2020. People won't see that coming. The Democrats will see the Rust Belt. They won't see this. And I can tell you, I've spoken to probably 7,000 pastors in 20 different states in the last couple of election cycles. And I'm telling you, there's a pent-up frustration and people don't believe it. Democrats take them for granted, Republicans ignore them, and I'm telling you, a one person changing is a 2-vote swing in an election cycle in that demographic. So we also in Houston had our Secretary of Energy, our former governor, Rick Perry, and our Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick, involved. Great man. He just did an incredible job that night. And so here's what we do. We take pastors, and a lot of different groups were doing the motivational part. They were gathering pastors, they were mobilizing them, and I would ask them, how are you measuring? What's your ROI, your return on investment? I'm a business guy, I own a business, that's the way I think about even ministry stuff or political stuff. And most of them would do these rah-rah, what I call pep rallies, but they couldn't tell you if there's 500 people in the room, how many people did that represent? So when we fought for this last legislative session, we brought 500 pastors from across Texas, and I can tell you what church they were, what their membership were, and 350 was the average. So when 500 pastors showed up in Austin, and we released them with a badge that says, here's your state legislature, and here's your state senator's name, and we taught them how to do it. Hello, my name is Pastor so-and-so. I represent 1,000 people in your district. Remember, a House rep guy usually wins by a few hundred votes. It's 5,000 total, usually on average. Is there anything I could pray for you for? Me and my 1,000 people. And by the way, I'm here with 5 other guys. We did this and systematically changed vote after vote after vote after vote in that cycle. And the ones who wouldn't change, over 80% of them found a new job in the next cycle because we knew exactly who they were, but now pastors knew who they were. So we have these pastors join together and send a letter and say, hey, we've all gotten together across denominational lines, across racial lines. We all care about our state. We care about these issues of life and marriage and religious liberty and men going in women's bathrooms and those kind of things, right? And so it woke people up. But we don't just want to motivate them. What do we want to do? We want to mobilize them to register, to vote, and then to begin to lobby and teach them how to do that. The mechanisms for that, we measure every single one of them. You can do email registration, online registration. It's stunning what we discovered. Every group out there was handing out voter registrations in churches and assuming it worked. I can now empirically tell you, without a shadow of doubt, it does not work. I was doing it. We went to the Secretary of State. Every single week after the activity, we measured it, and here's the key, and this is where even Dr. Scarborough, he told me last year, actually, about 6-7 years into this process, he said, John, I never wanted to tell you, because I didn't want to discourage you, but I thought you were crazy when you came up with this idea. The way you can measure what happens when a pastor gets involved is have him share his church membership list with you. You take it to the county, find out who's registered and who's voting, because it's all public record. It's not even that crazy expensive. It's just complicated and cumbersome, and it's a whole lot of messy data, right? So we sign a privacy policy with the pastor. We don't tell him who the names are, because what happens if half the people aren't registered? It means some of his staff or their staff wives or some of the leaders in the church probably aren't even voting, right? Some of you are smiling at me and some of you are looking nervous, right? And so literally, it's the only way you can measure. If a pastor does A, here's the ROI, the return on investment. If he does B, here it is. So we did emails. We had the pastor mail them a voter registration saying it's critical to be salt in line. There's a next election coming up. It's critical. And then we would measure for the next several weeks at the Secretary of State how many of them actually did it. And I could then go to the pastor and say, you're the only one that will ever see this. Now, if you want your staff, or your board, or your volunteers, and what most of them do is they have maybe a Tea Party activist or some conservative activist says, I'll do it, Pastor, let me do all the legwork, let me do all that. You know what the breakthrough was? So for me, David picked up 5 stones, and everybody, loves that story because it kills him on the first blow. Well, I felt like we threw one and missed him. He's still coming. We threw another one with emails, missed him. This isn't working, God. He had 5 stones, right? So I'm like, I'm running out of ammunition here. I pick up the next one, throw it. It doesn't. The first 3 things, I felt like it was miserable failure. It's not working. And so I literally go to the code. And in Texas, I cannot collect yours. So I came up with some crazy ideas, like you could put it in a mailbox. I thought, well, God, could I get a mailbox in every church in America? It's like, maybe I can start with the mega churches and test if the people can put it right in the mailbox. It's got personal information. Well, I figured out there's a thing called deputy registrar. How many of you ever heard of that before? See, you guys are activists. This is awesome. Most people are like, what? Deputy what? Well, deputy registrar means you just go to Tarrant County, you take a 20-minute class, 30 at the most, and you get certified. I did it, my wife did it, several people did it. So we started taking volunteers like you that go to church, and we had them go do it. Then we said to the pastor, look, this is how you tell them. And you say, listen, here's my congregation right here. This is not a political act, it's a spiritual act. We need to be salt and light. The reason that there's so much darkness in this country is the church is withdrawn from so many institutions. When the church withdraws from something, it's meant to be the light. The darkness comes in. Well, the solution to the darkness is get the light back turned on. So anything the church withdraws from, Hollywood, media, the education system, the government, it's dark because we're not involved turning our lights on. It's not complicated. Everybody goes, oh, it's terrible. Half of them are registered, half of them are voting. I'm like, I can spin that to be positive. There's a silver lining in that. It doesn't take many of us to take over. Do you know how many people voted in the primary to determine all our statewide elections last cycle? 6%. Wow. On the one hand, that's abysmal. On the other hand, it doesn't take a lot of us to win those seats. We can do it, I'm telling you. And so we measure it that way. So we did, this is when we launched it with Lieutenant Governor over the bathroom bill. This is where we brought the pastors down, educated them, and turned them in. One of the pastors from Texarkana called me. He's got about a 1,500-member church. And he said, John, this is a game changer for me. I've been a Christian 30 years. I've been telling my people to register, telling them to vote. And I've been politically active for 20 years. I never knew. And this is why I'm encouraging. If you can go next week on the 16th, go. They'll carpool 10, 20 cars. I'll give you one of my cars. I got a Suburban and I got a Sequoia. If you want some more to go, go. And the reason is because it matters. He called me and he said, this changes everything. I walked in and changed the vote of my state senator and my state representative. I'm bringing busloads of my church people back now because I didn't realize you could just walk in and do it. It's not like D.C. where they got 5 gatekeepers that keep you out of them. You can get into their office and you can make a difference if you're just willing to do it. So this is how we measured it. This is where the 500 churches came from that we brought to Austin. We raised money with some businessmen and women and told the pastors, you get here and we'll put you in a hotel overnight. We've proven empirically when the husband and wife come together, they stay more engaged, they have better results, and they stay engaged longer. Now, I feel silly sometimes when I measure this stuff because I'm like, duh, 2 are better than 1, they have better return for the price. I should have known that. I mean, golly, why am I measuring that just to find out the obvious, right? But sometimes it helps to know things I thought work don't work, and things that I thought probably work, they really do work. And the reason is because if the pastor's standing up, pushing the envelope to get people engaged, what's going to happen? There's some people in that church that write checks that are going to go like this. So if his spouse is at home saying, sweetheart, do the right thing no matter what the cost, it's a whole lot easier for him to do it when 2 are with 1. Does that make sense to you? I'm just being honest with you, okay? And so here's we call it Acts 20:28 to the pastors. This is on the pastor side, not the people side. It's an umbrella brand under Vision America. And this is a scripture that says to pastors, to church leaders, pay careful attention to yourself. So I start with the pastor. If you're not registered, you're not voting, or you're only voting in the general election every 4 years, you're not involved in the primary, you're not involved in lobbying, I'm trying to get you on fire because you're going to set those people on fire. The number 1 person that changes a vote is a person like Julie or Fran or Chris, that your friend knows you're politically up on all this stuff, and they just say, look, I can't figure this out. Can you tell me who to vote for school board and county judge and all? And you just tell them, and they don't really know all the facts. They just trust you, right? The number 2 person is their pastor. They wouldn't be going there. 75% of the people in 2016, the number 1 thing they relied on was a non-partisan voter guide. Why? They don't trust the media. They don't trust the PACs. They don't trust the parties. They trust their pastor and they trust their friends. Okay? And so we use this. This is what the report looks like. Again, we sign a privacy policy. The church gives us their membership list, and no one ever sees it except that pastor. So this was very, very difficult because people would ask me, have you done this church? Have you done that church? Have you done my church? And like, I'm a lawyer, so I know what a non-disclosure privacy agreement is. I'm like, you're going to have to ask your pastor. I'm not telling you. And sometimes the answer was yes, and sometimes the answer was no, but they never got it out of me. Okay? And this was very difficult because every new group of pastors also had the same question. Well, who's running? Who's done this? Does it work? Does it, you know? And I couldn't say anybody. And I don't give names. I just give percentages and numbers of who's registered, who's not. And then I break it down by age, demographic, and gender. Now, unfortunately, the women are going to love this. They're outvoting men about 10% across the board, okay? And some of the ladies are clapping. That's funny. But it's also a telltale sign of where our churches are right now. They're about 60% female. But then we break the last 10 years down and we show them the progress. So this is a church that we've been working with, and you can see 12 to 16, we've been able to increase them 24% in their turnout. In the general off-year elections, we increased it 30%. In the primaries, 318% and 26%. Obviously, we got involved and we just kept getting more and more and more. This is astronomical. This is unbelievable change. It's 3 times as hard to do what I'm doing because I'm doing it for political purposes, for business purposes, and for ministry purposes. But when we win 3 ways. Because I can say to political people, this is what we do, and this is how this matters, and this is what's coming near to a theater near you, right? And I can also tell the pastors, you don't think you matter, but you matter. And can I just say something to you? One of my hearts, I got saved. I didn't grow up in church. I studied world religions in college, and that's how I got saved. So it was a process for me. I was not a political activist when I was young, and I sure wasn't when I first got saved. It was a slow process for me because I mistrusted the whole mess. And the number one thing people say is, I don't trust any of it. I don't believe any of them. They say this, I vote for them, and then they go up there and do something the opposite. I felt the same way. I just threw the baby out with the bathwater. And then I started thinking, wait a minute. That's exactly what Satan wants us to do. He wants you to be discouraged. He wants you to be negative. He wants you to quit. Because if you quit, he wins, right? And so this is, I don't want to get into too much detail here, but this is the level at which we go. So this is an example state. Every red dot you see up here is the geolocation of a church, and then the size of the membership of that church. So you can see there's 9,578 pastors we believe are biblical pastors. There's about 15,000 in Virginia. We do the same thing in Texas. There's over 35,000 churches, about 20,000 of which we believe are biblical-based churches, okay? There's a lot of churches that don't stand for the things that we stand for, whether it's life, religious liberty, freedom, good stewardship. If people in the Bible need to have good stewardship, why would the government be immune from that? I'm just saying, stewardship is a moral issue. It's not just that you don't separate that in the Scripture. So I can literally tell you, if you look over here, here's a church of 300, 40, 60, 3,500, 500. So once I know where that geolocation is, I create a heat map. The darker the blue, the more concentration of the people I need to go after. I always have limited resources. I was in Israel with my wife last month, and I was so excited when the Israeli Defense Force generals were given a briefing. He said, listen, and he didn't quote this, but I remember from Art of War, if you've ever read that, when you're smaller than your adversary, you have to be smarter than him to win, right? So Israel said, listen, we're not America. You get to do certain things certain ways. We don't get to do it. We're little bitty, and everybody around us wants to wipe us off the face of the earth. So we have to be smarter than them. And I busted out laughing. He says, we buy F-16s and F-21s from America, and then we enhance them and make them better with our technology. That's so awesome. I love that. And so that's what we do, is we take the best technology the left uses, the right uses, and everybody in between, and we try to take it to the next level with the sole goal of waking up the people of God to change this thing. This is what one of our mega churches looks like in the city of Houston. Those blue dots are every church member in one church. Overlaid over this in the yellow, the blue, and the orange are house districts. You think we can't make a difference if I show a pastor that and say, hey, you have 2,000 in this house district, you have 1,000 in this house district, you have 500, you have 500, together that's enough to win the whole thing. Could the four of you get together and decide if there's a deacon or a Sunday school teacher or a volunteer or an elder or a board member or somebody who's willing to go run for the house district and y'all all get behind them? Do you see how simple this is when you get down to that point? Now, obviously, it's a whole lot of work to do that. Here's one of the ones, this is one of our mega churches in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Those red dots represent the geolocation of every person that's in that church. And the dark green are people who are fighting us on every single thing. Some of you who are really involved in this will know who some of these people are. And then the lighter greens are one that sometimes are with us and sometimes are not. And we're trying to make sure we put pressure to make our guys stronger. So this was a game changer for me. How many of you know who Jack Graham is? Prestonwood Baptist, more than half of you. Okay, so we're in a green room. We're about to talk to 350 pastors, and Dr. Graham looked at me and he said, John, y'all have done so much to help us. Is there anything I can do for you? Well, boy, you got to strike while the iron's hot, right? And so my mind was going, what do you ask for? You get one thing, right? What do you ask for? You ask for money, you ask for people, you ask for volunteers, you ask, I said, Dr. Graham, if you would just give me a 60-second video endorsement and go public, that would be a game changer for me. Because these pastors don't know me from Adam. I have to start all over with every one of them and go through the whole story and do the whole thing. They don't know me, but they know you. I have to earn their trust. They trust you. He said, I'd be happy to do that. So this is what he says in his 60-second video. I know him. I trust him. It works. I want every church in America to do it. This is, obviously, I didn't have this during these election cycles, but going forward, this is a game changer for us. He's on the President's Advisory Board, as you know. And then there's another pastor. How many know Robert Morris, Gateway? More than half of you too. Same exact thing. John, what can we do for you? You've done so much for us. 60-second video. I know him. I trust him. It works. We know that the church is who can change this country. And can I say something to you about pastors? A lot of people say, well, the pastors are the problem. The pastors, the first guy in 2012, it was a group in Washington, D.C. who put $400 million in the election and lost everything they tried. And when I gave him this idea, I said, can I ask you a question? You've got all the data on all 330 people in America, 190 million adults, everything that's public or can be purchased. You have a database. Obama had the database. Lots of people have the database. If I could tap into that and give the data to these different pastors, it would matter. And the head guy over the whole operation looked at me and said, it'll never work. And I said, well, why not? And he said, well, if pastors were doing what pastors should be doing, we wouldn't be in this mess. And I said, you just made my point. And he looked at me like I was crazy. He said, excuse me? I said, you just said if pastors were doing what pastors should be doing, we wouldn't be in this mess. I'm an optimist, right? Yeah. So what that means, if pastors will start doing what pastors ought to be doing, we'll get out of this mess. And he looked at me like, okay, smarty britches, you got me there, but it'll never happen. They'll guard that membership list like Fort Knox. You'll never get one of them. And I said, you may be right, but isn't it worth a try? What was the worst thing that's going to happen if David missed Goliath? Come on. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? What was already going to happen? They were going to be defeated. They were going to be destroyed. Nobody else was going out there. His brothers weren't. Saul wasn't. No one else was. So this isn't rocket science. It wasn't even a huge risk. We're going to die. We're going in the wrong direction. Somebody needs to start throwing some rocks at some giants and go, let's turn this thing around. What's the worst thing that happens? I miss him and he kills me. He was going to kill me or my family or my nation anyway. Right? Are you catching what I'm trying to say here? You can make a difference. When we talk to these pastors, they're not bad people. They all feel like we do. They've bought into the negative narrative that's out there that they don't matter. They go, I can't change this mess. It's all bad. It's all, I can't do it. And I don't believe your statistics anyway. I can't believe that half my people, if I ask them to stand up, half of them aren't voting. That just can't be true. And 85% of them aren't voting in the primary. I just can't believe it. But do you know that 100%, once I show them their own church, they do not need me to light a fire into them. Because they say, I can't change this country, but I can change my church. Any shepherd worth his salt realizes I can lead these people to at least be salt, at least be light. My 20,000, 50,000, 10,000, 100, our smallest church is 40. Our largest is over 40,000. We are in the process right now of working with a national group that has over 3 million evangelicals, and we're trying to help them now decide. So think through the complexities I got to deal with just in that project, right? But it's exciting to me because it's making a difference. So Charles Flowers is one of the pastors. He's on my board. He goes with me. I'll be with him in about a month and a half in San Antonio for a Black, White, Brown Pastors Conference that we are doing down there. And it's exciting what is going on. I'm telling you, you don't hear about it. You're not going to read it on the news. Mark Gonzalez is the same thing. These are other pastors that have endorsed us. So I showed you what we do with pastors. This is what we do with people. And I've got a few more slides. I may or may not get to them because I want to give you some questions. But this is what we did in Pennsylvania. So we take the data and we can now online through digital there's 3 ways you can identify where people are on issues. You can knock their doors, less than a third will answer it, it's declining every year. You can call all their phones, less and less people have landlines, it's harder and harder to get to them. Or, and this is crazy, again, I thought I was crazy trying this because I would never do this, but a lot of people will answer quizzes and surveys and who's the greatest president in your lifetime? Oh, I'll answer that. And then here they go. Well, we started identifying 3,000 people a day saying I'm pro-life, and then a couple questions later, I'm not registered. What do you think I'm going to do with that data? Are you kidding me right now? You're telling me you're pro-life and you're telling me you're not registered. You're not a bad person. You just need a little education and a little motivation. And I need to put the cookies on the lowest shelf for you to help you get registered and help you go vote. Do you see what I'm saying? So that's what we did up here. And we do this in every state that we work in. So this is what Pennsylvania looked like. We identified hundreds of thousands of people, and then we create a heat map. Most groups that would go mobilize pastors would go to Philly because it's a big place, or go here because I got a pastor friend I went to seminary with, or go to Pittsburgh, which is down here. It doesn't work because it's where the least amount of people are. Do you remember the first Iraq war when they had the smart bombs that went in the front door of the geolocation? I talked to some of the people that were there on the ground for 6 months setting those locations and making sure some people didn't stay alive that were up on towers, radio towers, and get taken down. That war was going on for 6 months before the 2 or 3 days that we all saw publicly, right? This went on for months, and people, most of my friends, and there were times after the Access Hollywood tape came out that I thought I had lost my mind. I thought, what am I doing? This is high risk. And I had a lot of friends, I mean close friends and people who were even in this movement tell me there's no way I'm ever voting for this man. No way. Did any of you ever hear that? Did you have one person, friend or friend say, I'm not voting, or I'm voting libertarian, right? Oh, man, it was just me, I guess. Or y'all don't want to talk about it. So we figured out this is a pretty hot spot. There's more people in Lancaster County than in the majority of all these counties combined. Why is that? I'm scratching my head going, this is what the data's telling me. So it's, again, back to Goliath. I got to hit it right in that little bitty spot. Why? Well, I found out this is where the Mennonite and the Amish were, and they're conscientious objectors, and they don't vote in the political process. But they got sick and tired of losing their religious liberty, and they knew this wild man running for president named Donald Trump was talking about it and going to do something about it, but they don't have cars, and they don't know how to vote. Right? You got good information, you got a problem, how do you solve the problem? So we started working with different churches. We did pastor events there as well, because it's strategic. But we started working with different people. Would you be willing to go pick up this person who doesn't have a car and doesn't know how to vote and drive them to the polls? It was crazy what was going on the ground. I stayed encouraged by being up here, and again, I don't want to offend anybody here, I'm just trying to be real with you. Donald Trump wasn't a Sunday school teacher that was the first person on the top of my list of the 16 candidates that we had. And so I didn't wake up and go, oh man, this is going to be awesome. This guy's going to beat all 16 of these governors and senators that have hundreds of millions of dollars in the bank and name ID, and then he's going to beat the Clinton machine. I never dreamed that that would happen, right? I stayed in that county the last 3 weeks of the election and watched the election results from that county.
Wow.
I woke up after 3 hours of sleep because I had to get on a train and go to a meeting in New York, and I literally felt like, did that really just happen? You know Lord of the Rings? How many of you seen Lord of the Rings? You know when they're fighting and they're swinging their sword and they're dying and they're losing all their guys. It's like, look, we're going to die anyway. It's like going back to my David and Goliath. I don't mean to keep saying that story again, but look, what do you got to lose? You're going to die anyway. You might as well die swinging, right? And so I literally thought those last several weeks, we were down 5 points here. We went into Michigan. We were down 8 points. We went into Wisconsin. We were down 7 points. It looked hopeless. You turned on the news election night. If anybody did, I like to flip between the conservative spin and the liberal spin. I'm not going to name which networks those are, but they're spinning on, you know. And I loved watching all the meltdowns that night. So this is what our voter guides look like, okay? It's not a hit piece. We do something really, really controversial, but we're willing to take the risk. We're challenging an IRS rule that says you can't have a voter guide unless you have the person answer the survey question. Well, I think that's blatantly constitutionally incorrect. I think it violates the Constitution. If I'm giving you a broad range of issues and I'm documenting every single one of those issues, then I have the right to free speech. And so, come on IRS, come sue me. And I got a team of other lawyers. I'm a lawyer, and so I got a bunch of buddies that do Constitution, Kelly Shackelford and ADF and Matt Staver and people like that. We all sign off on it saying, come on IRS. They're just chomping at the bits for the IRS to bring something on this, right? And so we figure out what changes people's minds, okay? And so Mitch McConnell wasn't the poster child, again, of my favorite person in the universe. But if Mitch McConnell wouldn't have been Mitch McConnell, we would have Hillary Clinton as our president right now. And that's a sobering fact. When I tell most people that who don't like Mitch McConnell, they go, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, if he folds on Garland, there's no Supreme Court issue in that election. 61% of evangelicals did not want to vote and did not like our current president, but voted for him anyway over that single issue. 61%. You with me? God can move in mysterious ways and crazy ways. And so our voter guides, we do two things. We pass them out to pastors we know are biblical and we know are willing to pass them out. And then we micro-target them based on your top issue. So if I know your top issue is life, I'm going to just show you the life issue and say, you want to see more? And yours is Second Amendment, and yours is taxes, and yours is Obamacare, and yours is religious, on down the line. Whenever I find out what your top issue is, all I need is a hook to get you to read the rest. And you go, well, I like you on that issue, but I may not agree with Trump on everything or Hillary on everything, but I at least want good information. All you do is hit the button, and you go exactly through this hyperlink of where they said it. So I started passing these out. We were in Florida. I had another pastor's event. We followed Franklin around the country. We had some talks with them about partnering with them. They finally decided we can't partner with anybody because we partner with you. We're going to have to partner with everybody. So the answer is no. And I pulled a Ronald Reagan. I said, well, you can't endorse me, but I'm going to endorse you. So what we did is we mobilized pastors everywhere they were going, and we had the pastors bring their people to go to the Capitol, and they went from 10 to noon. When they finished at noon, they let everybody go home, and no one had eaten. So I booked the Capitol where they were in each one of those states and had a pastor's luncheon. And so all the pastors, I'm asking you for months to bring your people. You bring your people. Franklin Graham wins. All you come in, and for the next 2 hours, I'm telling you how you can change this country. Does that make sense to you? It's like God can give us little bitty ideas that can change things. Don't get lost in the hopelessness. Just stop watching the news if you get. I hardly ever watch it because it's not really encouraging. It's a bunch of intentional facts that are spent. We did this in Florida too. I don't have time to go into this. We just did it in this last election cycle. 1 million paper voter guides to 3,000 of our churches who we know are with us in biblical, and we'll hand them out, and 300,000 micro-targeted. Facebook, social media was the key to 2016. It will not be in 2020. It's like the Rust Belt. The far leftists, and I make a difference between a liberal and a leftist. I don't know if you've ever heard this before, but a liberal believes in free speech. John Kennedy was a liberal, and he cut taxes, he believed in the military, he believed in free speech. A leftist believes in socialism, communism, and there is no free speech unless you agree with us. If you agree with us, you have free speech. If you disagree with us, you're hate speech. Right? And so we literally got a call from some of the state leaders, and they said, if you had not done those 1.3 million guides, this election was decided by 10,000 votes in the Senate. That's one more Senate that if Trump gets another Supreme Court nomination, he's not going to need to worry about. And 32,000 for the governor, which is the #1 decider in 2020 for who's going to be the president this next election cycle. So we try to be strategic when we do this. Here's our results. And I'm probably going to stop here and open it up for questions because I could keep going and going. The purple line here, we felt like we had to win in 2016, Florida, North Carolina, Ohio. The white line is the election results of how much the president won by. And you can see Pennsylvania, this was the Rust Belt. This was just a possibility. This was a slingshot from a little boy to a 9'3" giant, right? And look at the results. 800,000 voter guides went into Pennsylvania, 44,000 votes, 22,000 votes, 11, 0.2, 0.7, 0.8. There were 2 times that I cried when the election was over. One of the times was when we did the after-action review, after-action analysis, just like every military campaign would do. Politics, you understand, is war with no blood, right?
It is.
You understand that?
Yeah.
People would say to me, and I feel like I'm supposed to share this, they say, well, I'm just not voting for either one of them. And I'm like, and one of the guys was actually a key leader. I won't name his name. He's a good friend of mine, but he just wouldn't yield. No matter how much we argued, he would not yield. And I understood it. I had, my daughter was turning 18. She was going to be voting for the first time, and her friends were texting me from college when they accessed Hollywood, Mr. Graves, what do I say about this? What do I say? This is a messy, messy process. And I prayed and prayed, and I felt like God gave me a picture of Churchill. And if you'll remember history, Churchill hated Stalin. He hated communism. He spent his life warning England, and Chamberlain and everybody else wouldn't listen to him, that there's threats that are arising out here. We have to be aggressive to stop this stuff. We can't live in the Shire. The enemy, the evil, is coming to us. And when a greater enemy than Stalin arose in Adolf Hitler, he formed an alliance with his arch enemy. He had spent decades trying to destroy communism in order to defeat Hitler so that he could then go back. Times of war call for very, very difficult decisions for us. Does that make sense? And when I said it to this guy, he said, you know, I've never thought about that before. I said, if you don't vote, you're letting Hillary Clinton replace Scalia. Do you understand? That's a 30-year decision. And this was the game changer for me. I was in Orlando. I had about 700 pastors. I was beat up. The polls had just come out that the Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump were the most disliked nominees for presidential candidate in the history of presidential polling. So I had 700 pastors in there. 40% were minority. And it's like, look, this is pointless. These people are all telling me the same thing. We're not voting. We're out, we're out, we're out. So I feel like God gave me an idea. I said, can I just say something to you? You know, I talked about the poll, and everybody kind of chuckled and laughed. And I said, you're not voting for a president in November. And then they kind of looked at me, and I had a dog turns his head sideways like, are you crazy? What are you talking about? It's a presidential election. I said, you're not voting for a president in November. You're voting for 6 presidents in November. The average tenure of the Supreme Court of the United States is 24 years. One of these 2 people is going to decide the next 6 presidential terms. This president has got 4 or 8 years at most, and they're gone. And literally the room gasped, like, oh, it's not an option to stay out of this. It's not an option to stay home. We have to stay engaged. And the second time that I cried, besides this one, was the night that I got home after the election, and I got 5 kids. Let's see, they would have been 8 to 18. And they came running to me, Daddy, Daddy, you did something for the country. Daddy, Daddy, you made a difference. And I literally was so tired, it had not hit me yet. It had not hit me yet. Because I was just trying to do whatever I could do, and I felt like a BB shooting a bull. I felt like this is not working, God. This is not working. And then God showed up and did something that shocked the establishment on both sides. I believe this particular person is a disruptor that's leading our country right now.
Yeah.
And so I want to open it up to questions. I know I was given a certain amount of time. Do I have you carry a mic and I hold one here so there's no speeches and there's just questions? This is on.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
All right, questions?
No questions whatsoever. Okay, let's go
You
on.
got to give him a second.
I'm joking. I'm joking. Some of them are. Is anybody going to watch the NCAA championship tonight? So I went to law school at Texas Tech, and so my kids have that on. First time ever they've even been to the Final Four. Yes, sir. Which question?
I've only just recently become aware of the Innocence Project, and they work primarily with African Americans who've been unjustly accused. I was at an exoneration of one man who was in prison for 21 years for murder he never committed. And it seems to me that that's really a problem for the African Americans. So do you have any idea along those lines?
I could preach for a whole long time. When I got out of law school, I went into an all-black church. Have you ever heard of Tony Evans? Any of you? Dr. Tony Evans has a thing called Urban Evangelical Missions. And I did civil rights stuff, constitutional law stuff was my passion back then. I had just gotten saved in college. And for 5 years, I was in an all-black church. My nickname was Casper. And I look back on it now, and God gave me an education that I couldn't buy with all the books in the world. And so one of the things we do, if you'll go to our website, and you'll see that the way I do this across the country is I get attacked from the far left and the far right. There are a lot of Republican people, well-meaning, and I love them, and I'm with them on 70-80% issues, so I try to work with them, but they've withdrawn their funds because I work with minority pastors as well. And I'm going to talk about an elephant in the room here, so I'm sorry if I'm stepping on your toes, but it's one of the things God's given me a grace to do. The white church, too often, wants to talk about life, marriage, and religious liberty and go to the house. If you only want to mobilize the conservative, already existing white church, that's all you need to do. And there's a whole lot of groups that's all they exist. And there's nothing wrong if you just exist on one of those things. But when you talk to African American black pastors, you need to also talk about poverty. You need to talk about prison reform. And I believe, and I call it biblical justice. There's no such thing as civil rights. All the civil rights movement came from the Bible. The slavery ended because of the Bible. And I just was talking to a friend of mine. He studied the sermons during the lead up to the Civil War. All the southern states were preaching that it's your right to own property and people can't take your property. All the northern states were saying people are human beings and they have rights. Just like what I consider abortion today is the slavery issue of our day. In 100 years from now, people are going to say, wait a second, you thought you could kill a human being because you didn't want to pay for it? Or because it was a girl instead of a boy? Or because it had Down? What? What kind of culture did you live in? And it's this president. What is the narrative? If you read Steve Bannon, he had been called a lot of nasty, ugly things. But until he became the campaign manager for Donald Trump, he had never been called a white supremacist or a Nazi. Think about it. What can you not do to a Nazi? If you can label this president, that's why I believe the black pastors are what's going to change the deal. Now, I'm about to say something that's maybe you've not heard before, and it might shake you a little bit. But this president, the reason I had John Cornyn at this event, who's not always with us, and he's not always a champion on some of our issues, but I'm a Reagan guy. If you're with me on 70% of the issue, I'm gonna eat this elephant one bite at a time and keep moving forward. If I'm aligned with you on something, let's get that done, and then we'll disagree on the other stuff we don't agree on, right? He was pushing prison reform. We spent the entire summer fighting the black Democrat caucus in the House that wouldn't let us have prison reform over exactly what you're talking about. If something's unjust and wrong, which is why our system was set up of innocent until proven guilty. And what happened to this last presidential appointment for Supreme Court? Was he innocent until proven guilty? Or was he guilty until he could prove his innocence on an accusation? And now most all of them have recanted, and there's no consequences for any of them. Right? Well, we got it through there, and then we could not get the vote in the Senate. So we began mobilizing pastors, black, white, and brown, all over the country. And let me put this to you. I even say this to people on economic issues. If you don't even believe in the moral issues of right and wrong, it costs $40,000 per year per person to house everyone who's in prison. What this thing does is allow you, if the person's being rehabilitated, for faith groups like ours to come into it. Matter of fact, our church has just planted 2 church campuses inside of 2 Texas prisons, and over 500 people in the first couple of months are already saved out of that process. And I'm helping because I worked with the President's Faith Council to get them in federal prisons, because that does make a difference. And this is what black pastors will say to me. In a room like this, I can't get them to say it because the political pressure is so intense. The narrative is he's got to be a white supremacist and he's against all of us, so we need to stick together. But when they get me one-on-one, here's what comes out. I don't bring it out. I don't even tell them all the stuff I'm doing. They say, Barack Obama wasn't a black president. He was a gay president. He didn't do anything for the black community. Look what he did for the gay community. And I'm telling you, they're frustrated. They're very, very frustrated, and they ought to be. And so this issue you're talking about, if it's a justice issue, it ought to be an issue we care about, and it ought to be an issue we talk about. Now, it may not be the grandest issue in the world, but what's happening over and over and over is a minor drug offense. A kid is getting sent to prison for 2 years. Who's giving him his college education for the next 2 years if we're not allowed to come in and present the gospel or present work ethic or present financial budgets or present skill sets or teaching confidence or getting healed from the trauma he came out of? Who's doing that? A bunch of gang members and murderers. And so now he's getting his PhD. The recidivism rate, which means reduced crime when somebody gets out, if they're involved in a faith-based group, plummets to almost nothing. It is irrefutable that when people of faith get involved in this, it matters. Does that help? Does that help your question? And I'm telling you, it matters, and we need to be passionate about the whole range of issues that matter. And when you start talking about it, most black pastors start with me with their arms crossed. I tell them a little bit of my testimony. I gave you one part of it, but I give more, and they're going to go, wait a minute. Maybe you're not just one of those white, racist, Republican conservatives. And by the way, I don't know if you heard this on Rush Limbaugh a couple weeks ago. You should think about this. He said, stop using the word conservative. Stop using it. Because what it's become is a buzzword to the very people who are conservative. The majority of people in the black community that are believers and the Hispanic Latino community that are believers are conservative. But you can't use the word conservative. You just say, do you think somebody should work for it? Do you think people should have a budget? Do you think life matters? Do you think that the government should stay out of your business? Do you think, it's like, I agree with all that. Well, then you're a conservative. But I'm not going to call it that. I'm not going to tell you that's what you are. I'm just going to say, well, here's a guy who's actually supporting those things. Does that make sense? I thought that was revolutionary for him, who that's been his mantra and his word. And he's saying, listen, I figured it out. It's the language. Look at the bathroom bill. Do you know the very first difficult thing that they do in every one of those bathroom bills? They call it an anti-discrimination ordinance. Why? Because the language is its first defense. If I now challenge your anti-discrimination ordinance, what am I? I'm a discriminator. You can use different language to say the same thing. Does that make sense? Great question. Next question. Yes, ma'am.
How do you get pastors to pass out voter guides?
Yeah.
For the 501c? Like, how do you get all that?
So ours are church approved. So I show them that legally, and I have several of the top national experts sign off that this is a church. If you didn't hear her question, she said, how do you get pastors to do this? Not all pastors will do it. But some pastors will go from a 0 to a 1, and then a 1 to a 2, and then a 2 to a 3. So they might get educated. They might start saying, well, I need to start preaching on these issues. And then they might say, well, I'm going to at least get my people registered. Then they might, and some of them are ready to go from day one when they go, let's charge the gates. We can make a difference here. We show them the evidence. So everything I just showed you, I show the pastors, you matter. You're the one that can change this thing. If you study spiritual awakening, you study spiritual revivals, there's been 2 that are pastor-led. There's been a lot lay-led, but only 2 have been pastor-led. One freed us from England and one freed slaves. Those are the 2 spiritual awakenings that have been pastor-led in this country. And so I believe that if the church just wakes up, we win. The numbers are there. The problem is a lot of them are passive. Now, I am challenging them, but I'm doing it in a loving, encouraging way instead of saying, you idiot, shame on you. I don't come in with that language, right? And a lot of people in this work do. And I say, if you came in and said that with me, and I didn't know who Jesus was, I'm done with you, right? I could tell you so many stories, but I'm telling you, it's happening. Yes, ma'am.
Well, so since the IRS prohibits a 501c3 from endorsing a candidate,
Right.
How do you take the fear from a pastor saying,
Yeah.
or can we get that changed, or is there a need for it?
Yeah, so if you didn't hear that, there's the 501c3 rule. She's talking about the Johnson Amendment. How many of you know what the Johnson Amendment is? Man, a very educated group of people here. I love this. This is not normal. This is awesome. So the Johnson Amendment is where they tried to scare, because churches were going after Lyndon Johnson with all his gang activity and immoral activity and whatever, and it unfortunately was our state senator who slipped a rider in and got it passed without any debate or anybody knowing it, but it's worthless. It's pointless. I literally tell the pastors, your 501c3 letter is a piece of paper on the front of a tank. It's pointless. Rip it up. There's been one church that's been attacked under that. He ran a billboard in New York attacking Bill Clinton when Bill Clinton was running for president. They took his letter away, and guess what happens when you take his letter away? Nothing! A church has been a church since the First Amendment was written in this country, and we get to say, I tell the pastors, I don't want you as the church is not supposed to endorse or oppose a candidate. I tell, there's several tricks you can do with the pastor. Some of the pastors are bold and will say, listen, the church can't endorse or oppose anybody, but me, John Graves, as the pastor of this church, I'm endorsing this person, this person, this person, this person, and that person. If you don't want to be that bold in front of everybody, you can say, listen, this church doesn't endorse anybody, but if you want to know who I'm voting for, I'll be standing by the door when you all walk out today and shake your hands. If you're interested, let me know. Or, the most subtle thing is, wow, there's this church-approved, nonpartisan voter guide that's just the facts. What do you mean Hillary Clinton said that you can abort a baby all the way up until the point of death? Well, here's where she said it. It's just the facts. That's not an endorsement of anybody. You see, my voter guide wasn't a hit piece. It wasn't slanted. It wasn't vote for. It wasn't I endorse. It was just, here's the facts on about 12 or 14 different issues. Does that make sense? So it is happening, but some of it is, and I'll be real honest with you, some of the pastors hide behind that. The truth is, I don't want brother so-and-so that's a big tither or giver to leave, and he's a little more, wants me to stay out of politics, or is a little more left-leaning. That's the real challenge that I have to work with him on. Yes? Yes?
I'm aware of the situation that happened with the voter guide at Gateway.
Yes.
I just wonder if you could
Wow.
share.
How many of you know about that situation? Man, this is a very educated group of people. Okay, so the question was, there was voter fraud at Gateway Church, which is it's my home church, so that's one of our churches. And I can say that now because my pastor has said, this is the kind of stuff that we do. And he's taken a lot of flack over a lot of things. But what happened is someone took our voter guide, okay, in the Beto Cruz election that was passed out at that church. They stole it. They left our logo and all of our information, and they changed all the questions and flipped them all. Such that, just one example of pro-life, how many of you think Ted Cruz is pro-life? Okay, It said he was not pro-life because he did not vote for Obamacare, and Obamacare clearly takes care of people's health, and abortion is a health issue, therefore he is not pro-life. Okay? Now, I've been on Fox News with Todd Starnes and several other different groups about this. There will probably be more news coming on this. It is a crime, but you have to have a clearly identifiable defendant to know who that crime is. Does that make sense? So I can't just, if Chris did it, I can't just say I'm suing somebody and then I find out who Chris is. Chris would never do that. I'm liking Chris though because he's open carry. It makes me feel so comfortable talking about him. Because I always got to assume there's some spy that slips in and is trying to record this and spin it because I'm not leftist speech, I'm hate speech, therefore in their distorted view of the world, right? So this is bad. Because what they did is they then went and printed thousands of these, brought them inside the church campuses, this is the only church we know of so far, and mixed them with our voter guides that we give people as they leave the church. Now you want to talk about the links somebody will go to deceive you. If you're so comfortable, put out your own voter guide. Why do you have to deceive the people of God? Why do you got to come inside the house of God to deceive the people of God? That gets me a little fired up, okay? So there's an ongoing investigation, so I can't say too much in this setting.
Before 2020, it's going to come out?
I'm a military strategist kind of thinker, right? And so, if you're going to storm the beaches of Normandy, do you announce it to the world, or do you wait for the precise timing that it would be the most impactful? Right? So we'll see what God does. We still got some work to do, but what it was wrong, and what it does is it exposes their hand, as people say that. So anyone else? We have time for one more question, or is
Well,
that
I
it?
just want you, but we're actually out of time.
Oh, I'm
Can you
sorry.
just go over it one more time? So what do we need to do? We need to talk to our pastors? What
Yeah.
exactly, very clearly, do we need to do?
Here's Leah and Rebecca. Would y'all stand up back there? Leah at visionamerica.org. Leah and Rebecca are my Tea Party activist volunteers that go. The On Fire Church Christian women came to me and said, "We want to help. We'll do whatever we can." And they've been all over the country. Can you give them a hand? They literally. We would do pastor events, and there were times where I would get to the hotel and I would say, "What city am I in?" Because I would leave Orlando and go to Pittsburgh, or go here, go there. Leah at visionamerica.org, just write that down. Follow us on the emails. We give email updates of what we're doing, where the activity is, when different things. We're about to send one tomorrow on the Religious Liberty Senate Bill 17. Are y'all familiar with that? We're pushing that right now. Obviously, financial partners. Everybody knows that that's one of the things. I can't do this if I don't have jet fuel. I can have the best jet in the world, but if I don't have fuel to go forward. There were a lot of people, when this particular president became the nominee, pulled their funding from us. It was a very, very difficult cycle for us. But there were other people who said, "I don't care, I'm going to step up in the middle when everybody else is stepping back. The thing I need, even if it's small, because monthly people do that." But another thing that you can do is volunteer partners. We have times, if we have a pastor event in a Senate district in DFW or some other area, we're bringing them to Austin. If you sign up and tell Leah, "I want to volunteer," I'll call pastors to try to get them to a meeting. I'll call legislators to figure out. Or I'll help you research your next voter guide so that we have accurate information. That's one of the things that's a big, big challenge. So those are the three things that I would say that would be helpful. So, okay, thank you so much for your time. I'll be here for a minute to answer questions. Thank you guys.